At Obsidian Prime Steakhouse, table 12, Amara Adeyemi sat across from her husband Caden with perfect composure, watching him check his phone for the third time in 4 minutes, already knowing that his mistress Sarah Vance was coming to join them for dinner. Not as an apology, but as a power move orchestrated by a man who believed he could control everything and everyone around him. When Sarah arrived in an emerald silk dress with bold crimson lipstick, Caden stood immediately. He no longer stood for Amara anymore, and guided Sarah to the table with a territorial hand on her lower back, a gesture that told the entire room exactly what was happening. Sarah leaned into Caden's ear and whispered something that made him laugh genuinely, a laugh Amara hadn't heard directed at her in 14 months, and when Sarah turned to Amara with eyes sharp as broken glass and said, "You must be the wife." Like it was a job title for someone incompetent, Amara simply lifted her water glass with steady hands because she had been preparing for this moment longer than Sarah knew. The insults escalated as Sarah complimented her own dress and then made a cruel comment about Amara's wig, saying, "That's a nice lace front, you take such good care of it," in a voice dripping with mockery, and in that moment Amara felt the temperature in her own body drop from hurt to something colder, something more dangerous, clarity. Then Sarah reached across the table and pulled Amara's wig, the lace front lifting as Amara's natural hair fell loose. The steakhouse froze, waiters stopped moving, and Caden's face went white not because he was horrified, but because he understood. In that second that Sarah had just created evidence, something witnesses had seen, something a phone might have caught, something permanent. 3 tables away, a woman had her phone up and was recording everything, and when Amara stood with the grace of someone who had never been humiliated in her life, gathered her wig, adjusted her natural hair, placed the wig carefully on the empty chair, and met Caden's eyes to say, "I'm leaving and I'm calling my father." He finally understood he had made a catastrophic mistake, because Amara's father wasn't just wealthy. Dr. Gabriel Adeyemi moved through the city like he owned it because, in several legal and financial ways, he did. That same night, Dr. Adeyemi made one phone call to Okoro, a forensic investigator who had dismantled 7 corporate fraud cases in the past 3 years, and said simply, "I need everything, every angle, every receipt." And within 48 hours, the restaurant's security footage was sitting on his desk in high definition with multiple angles and time-stamped chain of custody documentation. Caden called Sarah at 3 a.m. with his voice shaking. "There's a video from the restaurant. She caught it all on phone." And Sarah's response was silence. Not, "I don't know." Not, "That's impossible." Just silence. Then she hung up. And by dawn, Caden had called his lawyer Richardson 7 times before finally getting through to hear that the video wasn't just evidence of infidelity, but of privacy violation claims, countersuits, and depositions that would expose his hidden accounts anyway. And he understood in that moment he had already lost. He just didn't know how badly yet. 3 weeks after the dinner, Amara filed for divorce with 16 exhibits attached. Security footage from Obsidian Prime, financial records showing funds transferred to accounts in Sarah's name, messages between Caden and Sarah discussing how to manage Amara, a receipt for a luxury apartment lease signed 6 months ago, and a filing that requested full custody of their joint assets pending trial and declared the marriage irretrievably broken. But what Caden didn't know was that Amara's father owned the building where Cole Meridian Capital operated through a corporate entity structured so carefully that it took 3 days of digging for Caden's lawyer to find the connection. And when Dr. Adeyemi wanted something, he didn't announce it. He simply instructed property management to begin a comprehensive building audit of every lease clause, every compliance document, every fire safety certification, and when they found violations, they had legal grounds to audit Cole Meridian's operational records, turning Caden's office into a very interesting place for lawyers to work. While Caden focused on his office audit, Sarah faced her own legal storm as her name appeared in messages between Caden and his accountant discussing discretionary payments, and when investigators traced the luxury apartment lease to a shell corporation, they found it had received 5 separate transfers from Cole Meridian Capital at $200,000 per month for a year and a half. And the apartment wasn't leased in Sarah's name, but her fingerprints were on the lease. Her ID was on the building security system, and CCTV showed her entering and leaving during times when Caden's wife, had no idea where her husband actually was. Through all of this, Amara continued her life with the same composure she had shown at the restaurant. Didn't post on social media, didn't call friends to gossip. She simply lived. Went to her office where her father had given her a position. In his corporate foundation that Caden had never bothered to understand, worked on a philanthropic housing initiative, attended meetings, and built something meaningful. And every single day she kept that same calm that told the world, I was never the problem. When Caden made a settlement offer of $50 million, assuming everyone had a price, Barrister Ifeoma Nwoko responded within 4 hours with, My client is not interested in settlement. She is interested in justice. We will see her in court, making it clear that Amara wasn't doing this for money, but to ensure that when this was over, the world would know exactly who her husband was and what he had done. The court date was set for October 17th at Lakeside High Court Family Division Courtroom 2A, and the filing made one thing absolutely clear. Dr. Gabriel Adeyemi was coming to testify not as a father, but as a witness, and what he was about to reveal would make everyone in that courtroom understand that Caden Cole had made the worst mistake of his life. In the weeks before trial, discovery continued as Caden's financial records became a nightmare with multiple hidden accounts, corporate accounts with missing documentation, a second property in another city meant to bypass community property. Division, and every single thing he had tried to hide was being found and making him look worse. Sarah attempted to leave the country, booked a flight to Lagos under her mother's maiden name, tried to withdraw $500,000 from her discretionary account. The bank flagged it. The account was frozen by court order the same day. Her passport was flagged at the airport. She was told she couldn't leave without court permission. She called Caden screaming and he didn't pick up because his lawyer had advised him to stop all contact with her, and by trying to disappear she had just admitted guilt to everyone watching. Meanwhile, Barrister Ifeoma was building a timeline that read like a prosecutor's dream with text messages from Caden to Sarah saying, She's at her father's place this weekend, we should use the time. And, I'm ending this marriage, I've already started. The paperwork without her knowing, and calendar entries showing Sarah's luxury apartment dates marked as free time with S, and financial records showing a pattern where every time Caden had a business meeting, Sarah appeared in the city, and every time Amara was away, money left his accounts. Caden's lawyer Richardson sat across from his client and said 4 words. We need to settle immediately, explaining that the evidence was comprehensive, the infidelity was documented, the financial concealment was proven, and Amara had witnesses. Not just her father, but his forensic team and her own legal counsel. And there was no path to victory that didn't end in Caden losing everything. But Caden, in his arrogance, believed he could still control the narrative. When Caden made a second settlement offer of $70 million, Barrister Ifeoma sent the response within 4 hours. My client is not interested in settlement. She is interested in justice. We will see her in court. And the message was clear. Amara wasn't doing this for money, but for the world to know the truth. 3 days before trial, an investigative blogger named Zara published Marital Fraud Inside the Cole Meridian Deception, a 20,000-word deep dive that outlined every piece of evidence, every financial concealment, every affair indicator with meticulous sourcing that went viral instantly. And within 45 minutes, something happened that Caden didn't anticipate. Zara's article included the names of people who had helped him, his accountant, his property manager, the bank manager who had opened the offshore accounts. Suddenly, they all had legal exposure and lawyers calling and investigators talking to them. Sarah learned about the article from her mother, who had seen it shared in a WhatsApp group. And by afternoon, her Instagram engagement had flipped completely, with supportive comments disappearing and replaced by people she had never met asking,
Did you really help hide his money? And how do you sleep at night? Her employer called HR and they didn't fire her. They simply said her position was eliminated due to restructuring. And by evening she couldn't go to the coffee shop she
loved because the barista had read the article. On October 17th, Amara walked into courtroom 2A at exactly 9:47 a.m. wearing the wig again, the same deep wave lace front Sarah had pulled, not because she had to, but because she wanted every person in that courtroom to see exactly what Sarah had violated. And Caden saw her and understood something he should have understood 14 months ago. His wife was not the fragile thing he had been treating her as. She was steel-wearing silk. She was every document his lawyers had tried to hide wrapped in composure, and when she passed Sarah in the gallery, Sarah's hand went to her mouth because she could see it now too. The moment when pretty doesn't matter anymore, when the truth matters. Barrister Ifeoma opened with simplicity, presenting the timeline from marriage to discovery of infidelity, to financial concealment, to humiliation at the restaurant, and then said something that made the courtroom go completely quiet. Your Honor, we will present evidence that the defendant has engaged in systematic fraud to conceal assets from this court and from his wife. We will show that the defendant's actions constitute not only grounds for divorce but grounds for a comprehensive asset freeze pending full accounting, and the judge leaned forward because this wasn't a typical divorce case anymore. The first exhibit was a text message exchange. Caden to Sarah. I'm filing divorce papers tomorrow. I've already hidden the offshore accounts. By the time her lawyers find them, they'll be too late. Sarah's response. What about the apartment? The paper trail? Caden. She won't look. She's too naive. And if she does, my father-in-law is too busy to care. And the courtroom was silent as Caden's jaw tightened and his lawyer put a hand on his arm. Dr. Gabriel Adeyemi was sworn in and walked to the witness stand with the quiet confidence of a man who had never been questioned and never would be. And when Barrister Ifeoma asked him to describe his professional background, he spent 20 minutes explaining corporate finance, asset management, shell corporations, and the techniques used by those who want to hide money from courts and spouses. Explaining it in language the judge understood with precision and clarity that was devastating. Then Barrister Ifeoma presented the exhibits, the offshore accounts, the shell corporation layers, the property titled to entities that had no purpose except to hide assets. And Dr. Adeyemi traced every single one, showed how money had been systematically moved to prevent discovery, showed the purpose of each concealment, showed that Caden hadn't made a mistake. He had planned this for over 2 years to hide his money and leave his wife with nothing but the marital residence and her own savings, and the judge was taking lots of notes. Before Dr. Adeyemi left the stand, Barrister Ifeoma asked him one final question. Dr. Adeyemi, based on what you've seen in the evidence, what is your assessment of the defendant's financial capacity to pay spousal support? And Dr. Adeyemi looked directly at the judge and said, the defendant has substantial assets. He's simply attempting to hide them. But based on this evidence, I would estimate his true net worth at approximately $300 million, not $50 million. And the courtroom gasped as Caden went white and understood that his entire strategy had been built on a lie that had just been exposed in front of a judge who was visibly furious. During the break, Richardson made a call to Barrister Ifeoma offering $150 million, full custody of the marital residence, retirement accounts, everything, because he understood that if this went to a full verdict, Caden would lose even more and face asset freezes and potential fraud charges. And when Barrister Ifeoma took the offer to Amara, she asked one question. Will it include a permanent public statement from Caden, admitting to the infidelity and the financial fraud? And when the answer came back yes, Amara accepted. 20 minutes later, Caden was brought back into the courtroom. His lawyer stood and said, Your Honor, my client wishes to make a statement. And Caden stood with his face pale and shaking, voice unsteady, and read the statement admitting to the infidelity, admitting to the financial fraud, admitting to attempting to hide assets, admitting to the apartment, admitting to every single thing. And when he finished, the courtroom was absolutely silent, not because people were moved by his admission, but because they understood he had destroyed himself completely. Judge Morrison took a moment, reviewed the settlement agreement, one final time, then issued her ruling. The settlement is accepted and approved. The defendant will pay $150 million to the plaintiff in full settlement of all marital property claims. The defendant will also be ordered to pay ongoing spousal support of $50,000 per month for 10 years. The marital residence transfers to the plaintiff. All retirement accounts transfer to the plaintiff. And the court orders a complete forensic audit of the defendant's corporate accounts. Any additional hidden assets discovered will result in contempt of court charges. And when she raised her gavel and said, This court finds in favor of the plaintiff Amara Adeyemi, case dismissed. The gavel came down and everything changed. Reporters rushed toward Caden asking for comments. He had none. He was escorted out by his lawyer looking like a man who had just realized his entire future had been rewritten in 3 hours. Sarah tried to approach him, but he walked past without a word because she was alone now, complicit in fraud, a liability, and within 24 hours, her lawyer would tell her that Caden was considering filing a lawsuit against her for her role in concealing assets, making her the scapegoat. Sarah tried to call her mother and got, "I know." The line went dead. She texted her closest friends, and all 3 marked the messages as read but didn't respond. She tried to enter her luxury apartment building, and the property manager stopped her with official papers saying her name was being removed from the lease as a co-occupant, and the unit was being seized as part of asset recovery for fraud investigation. And she realized she had thought she was safe, thought Caden would protect her, thought being the mistress meant you were valuable. She had thought completely wrong. Within 45 minutes of the ruling, Zara's article was published. Cole. Meridian CEO loses divorce case. Settlement reaches $150 million. Public confession ends defense. And within 2 hours it had 50,000 shares. Maxwell's article followed. The Adeyemi victory, when hidden wealth meets hidden shame. And by evening, major news outlets were covering it with headlines like, "Wealthy CEO exposed in marital fraud case, admits to hidden assets in court." Caden's name was trending on social media. Cole Meridian Capital's stock price dropped 3% in after-hours trading, and it would keep falling. Investigative journalists discovered that Sarah had actively participated in moving money. She had signed documents. She had knowingly accepted payments. She had helped hide assets. And court documents became public record with messages between Caden and Sarah discussing managing the wife and hiding the money published in full. Her former employer issued a statement, "We cannot align with individuals engaged in fraudulent activity." And by the end of the week, Sarah had gone from a woman everyone wanted to know to a woman being investigated for her role in the fraud. 2 weeks after the trial, Amara's lawyer confirmed that the first payment had arrived, $150 million in a trust account in her name, and she was now wealthier than Caden had ever been in his life. And when her father joined her for coffee at a quiet cafe, he simply smiled and said, "You had the composure. That's all that mattered. You never broke." And Amara thanked him for his help, while Dr. Adeyemi shook his head and said, "I did very little. You did the hardest part. You waited. You let the truth work for you." Cole Meridian Capital didn't survive the scandal, as investors wanted nothing to do with a company headed by someone facing potential fraud charges. The board called an emergency meeting. Caden was forced to resign. They appointed an interim CEO, and within 3 months the company was sold to a larger firm at a significant loss. Caden's golden parachute was worth $20 million, while the rest of his wealth was tied up in lawsuits and frozen accounts pending the forensic audit. He had gone from a man worth $300 million to a man worth $20 million, completely by his own hand. Amara continued her work with the philanthropic foundation, as the housing initiative she had been leading was expanded dramatically to 500 new units for families in need. She became known in the city not as Caden's wife, but as a woman. Building something meaningful, she bought a new penthouse apartment with a view of the entire city, and the day she signed the papers, she took off her wig, looked at herself in the mirror with her natural hair down and her own face showing her own power, and she understood something fundamental. She had never needed Caden, she had only needed to be herself. Everything else had come from that truth. 6 months after the trial, Caden Cole received a notification from his bank that his spousal support payment was due. He sat at his computer and transferred $50,000 to Amara's account, and for the first time in his life, he calculated. Whether he could afford to eat that week, he could barely. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part came the next morning when he opened his newsfeed and saw a photograph of Amara at a ribbon-cutting ceremony for a new housing development with 200 families moving into homes. The caption read, "Philanthropist Amara Adeyemi launches second phase of housing initiative, creating 500 new units." And Caden realized something that broke him completely. Amara hadn't just won the case. She had won the life he was supposed to have. She had taken everything he had tried to hide and turned it into something that helped people. He had destroyed her for a mistress, and Amara had destroyed him and rebuilt the city. And he had to pay for it every single month forever. 12 months after the trial, Amara stood at a ribbon-cutting ceremony for the second housing development, where 500 new families were moving into homes built on land that her father's company had purchased for development. The mayor was there. The media was there. But Amara's focus was on a woman who had just received her keys. The woman was crying, not tears of sadness, but tears of gratitude. Amara handed her the keys and said, "Welcome home," and in that moment, Amara understood what her father had always known. True power isn't about money. It's about the ability to change someone's life. Money just makes it easier. Caden Cole tried to appeal the court's decision. His appeal was rejected within 6 months. The evidence was conclusive. The fraud was proven. The settlement stood. He still paid $50,000 per month in spousal support. And every single month when that payment came out of his account, he thought about the moment Sarah pulled his wife's wig. He thought about how that one moment of cruelty cost him everything. He thought about how he had had a wife with composure and intelligence and grace, and he had thrown it away for someone who had helped him destroy his own life. And Amara, free and powerful, moved forward into a future he would never be part of because she had waited for the truth. The truth had waited back, and in the end, patience was the most powerful weapon of all.